We have come here today to honor the memory of our beloved Alan Edelman. We join together in offering the sacred words of our psalms and prayers and thanksgiving to God, who has given us the strength to live our lives with meaning and purpose. And we offer our own words of love in thanksgiving for the blessing Alan's life brought to us all. In Proverbs, we read, "The human spirit is the light of God. Within each of us, God implants a divine spark. Each of us has the obligation to tend to this spark and fan it into a flame that will light up one's own life and the lives of others. A lit candle can be snuffed out, or it can burn out, or it can kindle other candles. When the flame is passed on to others, the flame will continue to burn long after the original candle has been extinguished. Through our prayers and meditations, we remember Alan. Through our memories of Alan, we continue to kindle the flame of his life. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot lachen samach libi v'yagel kivodi af besari ish kon lavetach." From Psalm 16, "I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift." Kohelet wrote, "The eye never has its fill of seeing. Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world, never complete their task, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearned for yet another respite from the final summons, and how we yearned to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God, be now with those whose hearts are broken, because whenever parting comes, it comes too soon. Console them at this moment, be near to them when light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of healing." Our rabbis taught that there are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they emphasized that the crown of a good name exceeds them all. The book of Ecclesiastes says, "Tom shev mishemen tov." A good name is to be treasured above precious oil. Wealth, health, even life passes away, but a good name lives forever. It is this view that the Talmud teaches us. Monuments need not be erected for the righteous. Their deeds are their memorials. They will be remembered and revered for the kindness they have shown and for the love that they have given. Alan Edelman is a shining example of what it means to be a mensch. Psalm 23. "Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in the right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever." Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again. From health to sickness and back, we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Kohelet muses on the ceaseless and changeless cycles of nature. The sun rises and sets, the winds go round and round, ever returning to their starting place, and the rivers flow into the sea. The sea is never full. Everything happened before and will continue to happen over and over again, for there is nothing new under the sun. In the midst of these reveries, Kohelet tells us, Dor holech v'dor ba, v'ha'aretz le'olam omedet. One generation goes and one generation comes, but the earth is forever unchanged. Though Kohelet included the succession of generations in the monotonous, unchanging rounds of nature, there are crucial generations in the history of humanity who by their daring and courage have determined the course of history. If the generation of the Exodus had not ventured into the desert, we might still be wearing the shackles of slavery. If the Chalutzim had not begun to go up and build Palestine some 74 years ago, there would have been no state of Israel today. And if a generation of Jews had not devoted themselves to building and developing our synagogues and our institutions, we would not have the fine Jewish community that we have today. Alan Edelman was a member of a pioneering generation who, in the course of his 98 years of life, saw more change in the world than all generations before him had experienced. In a rapidly changing world, Alan was the center of stability, a good person whose religious beliefs and strong family orientation gave his family a point of stability around which to organize their lives. This afternoon, as we bid a final lech l'shalom, go in peace to Alan, we feel the truth of Kohelet's words. Dor holech, the older generation passes with him, but we feel that our lives have been enriched through knowing him, that his deeds will continue to benefit the Dor Ba, the generation that follows in his footsteps. In that spirit, it is my honor to invite the members of Alan's family to share their personal memories of our beloved Alan. They will share some of the stories from Alan's sacred journey through life and how those experiences helped shape the man that he was, touching countless lives and leaving a legacy worthy of God's blessing. I first invite his granddaughter, Sari Stone.
Lower this a little tall.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to me and my family. We weren't expecting so many people to be joining us to say goodbye to my papa, and we can really see how special of a person he was and how many people he touched by the wide range of people who have come to pay their respects. When I sat down to write my grandfather's eulogy, I had trouble initially identifying a few key stories that highlight his greatness. Papa's greatness didn't show in any one huge or special moment. What was so special about my papa was that each interaction with him made us better people, showed us how we should act, and encouraged us to view the world with a more positive light. What was special about my papa was his outlook on life, the way he conducted himself each and every day, and the kindness, respect, and love he had for everyone. Papa Alan lived through horrors that no individual should have to go through. Born in Poland and sent to a Siberian labor camp as a teenager, then finagling his way into America after surviving the Holocaust, Papa had all the reasons in the world to be negative. Had he become a grouchy old man, no one would have blamed him. However, instead, Papa approached the world with an optimism and happiness that outshined everyone. A smile always on his face, every meal was his best meal, every day was the best day. You couldn't help but be happy in his presence and feel deeply loved by his bear hugs. We frequently hosted Papa Alan and Grandma Jackie for Sunday night dinners. I remember the first time we served Marzetti poppy seed salad dressing. You'd have thought we had served a 5-course gourmet meal by the excitement Papa had about the best salad he's ever tasted. Every time I eat a salad with poppy seed dressing, I think of him, of the happiness that one can obtain from a simple bottle of salad dressing. Years ago, David took time to interview Papa and record him speaking about his experiences during the war. My husband Dan and I took some time to watch the video earlier this week. Papa relayed that after escaping from the Siberian labor camp, he and his brother landed themselves in a Russian prison with an 8-year sentence from escaping from the camp. David asked Grandpa how he felt when they were sentenced to 8 years in a Russian prison, and Papa replied, "Hopeful. I was hopeful that after our sentence it would all be behind us and that we could just move on with life. I don't know about you, but if I was sentenced to 8 years in a Russian jail, hopeful would not be the first feeling that would have come to mind." But Grandpa, ever the optimist, was able to see the good in the situation and hopeful that things would improve. Papa Alan was the epitome of the American dream. After the war, America had quotas about how many refugees they would take in. Children didn't affect the quota, so Papa had paperwork made that stated that he was younger than he was so that he could come to America. He arrived with 25 to 50 cents in his pocket, as he said. After a detour in New York, he eventually made it to Cleveland and started a plumbing business. As his business grew and became more successful, Grandpa's priority remained his family. The business was open from 7:30 to 4:30, 5 days a week, so that Grandpa could eat an early breakfast with his family together before he left for work, and so that he could be home for dinner every night. Though he was a man who was always happy, his happiness would shine most brightly when the family was together. Some of my favorite childhood memories are of our annual Hanukkah party. We'd all get together and Grandpa would make hundreds of latkes. We'd eat until we were stuffed. He was so happy to be providing for the family, feeding us, and seeing us all together and having a good time. It wasn't until Jordan was an adult and asked for the recipe that we learned the batter was purchased at Corky and Lenny's. When I was in college, I began making some personal changes and adjusting my religious observance. I was often self-conscious of my choices, and although I was confident that they were the right choices for me, I worried about how others would view me. Sensing my discomfort, Papa told me on many occasions that he was proud of me for pursuing what I thought was right. He was so proud of each and every one of us. He made us all feel special and loved, just as he did for everyone that he met. It wasn't a superficial facade. You could tell that it's truly how he felt. He shared it with all of us, and he truly just wanted all of us to be happy. I'll end with one last story that I think really summarizes how special of a person my Papa was. I feel very blessed that I was able to be with Papa during his last moments. After he peacefully passed, Jordan went to find a nurse at his nursing home. When he told her that we believed that Papa had passed, the aide standing next to the nurse said, "I want to come in too, he's my favorite." The nurses were tearful as they entered the room. They said that if all of their residents were as kind and gentle as Papa, what they called him also, their jobs would be far easier and more pleasant. Even with progressing Alzheimer's, when a person's filter often is gone, Papa's positive, kind, gentle, and optimistic essence continued to shine through and impact those around him. Despite being born into a very, very dark world, Papa Alan's essence was one of light, clarity, and goodness that illuminated the path of everyone he met. May we all strive to continue bringing that light into the world and to share it with others.
I now invite David Edelman, his grandson.
I had written exactly what Sarah had written. Just the same theme of how someone goes from really an idyllic childhood to so much loss and remains such a generous soul, I think is the treasure of Grandpa Alan. And if anyone has not seen that video, if you go to YouTube and search Alan Edelman interview, you can come up. It's 52 minutes, and it's just a really wonderful chance to hear his story. He grew up in a small town, he said, kind of like Pepper Pike, where his family had the lumber mill, and they had 3 shifts of people working, and it was right along a river, and he would, grew up like as a little kid floating down the river while his brother played the balalaika, singing. Like, you can just picture that kind of childhood. And he was mischievous. He was supposed to stay out of that lumber mill, and he didn't. He would sneak in for the 3rd shift and climb around, and he liked to tinker and learn how each of the pieces of equipment worked. And he shares a story that he got so familiar with everything that his father was gone one Sunday when a wagon showed up, and people were there, and they wanted to do an order, and they thought they had to wait for the next day for his father to take care of it. But he went out and said, I'll take care of you. And he got the list. He had to know the length of every board, the width, the depth, and he wrote up an invoice for the whole thing. And his father shows up at night and is like shaking his head, like, what are you doing? And he took the invoice and looks at it line by line by line and sees that it's 100% correct. And he said from that moment on, he had free reign of the lumber mill. And he said that's what saved his life. Because when he got shipped off to Russia, and if you can even imagine, the president of Poland had died, his father had been put in jail for being a capitalist, and all of a sudden the Russians come, and it's report to the train station by midnight, and he said 50 people in cots on each side of the train, shipped off for days into the cold wilderness. And when he arrived and ended up at a collective farm, they went through and said, what do you do for work? And he had heard that the tractor mechanics get treated the best, so he said, I'm a tractor mechanic. He had never been on a tractor in his life, had never touched a tractor, so they took him out of the field and said, start plowing. And he said, I haven't used this model before. Can you show me how this model works? And he was able to learn how to take apart the tractor and put it back together. And he said he lived outside the walls of the farm, and he got treated as good or better than the guards. He was able to steal food during harvest and bring it to his brother and his mother. He learned how to fool the system. The quota was based on the number of acres that you plowed. And so he put that thing 4 inches into the ground instead of the 18 inches, and it would fly back and forth, and he was like the top guy for quota. But when the harvest came, you just look, it's a little bit growing there, a little growing here, but he said that was the ridiculousness of the Russian system. So, and then he ended up shipped off to Neprogress, which is to help build what is now still one of the largest hydroelectric plants in the world on the Russia-Chinese border. And he said the average person there lived months. And he and his brother took care of each other. When his brother lost the energy, they would, he would take care of him. When he lost the energy, his brother would take care of him. They would share their piece of bread, their little bit of soup. And they survived he said, for their mother, that if they didn't come back, they wouldn't. And so they escaped, as Sari said, and ended up in prison. And then they were rifling through the profiles of people in prison and found out he's a tractor mechanic. And that's actually how he got out of jail, again, was because he was a tractor mechanic, and they needed people who could operate the machinery because everyone else was at the front line. So the war ended, he faked the papers. He's an illegal immigrant, so I'm a grandchild of an illegal immigrant, which I really appreciate as I think about the world today. And that's the person who Grandma said the other day, never heard him say a negative word about anything. How could someone go through that experience and not say anything negative about anybody, about anything? I asked him, can you tell me about a time when someone was cruel or mean in the war? Couldn't think of an example. How could someone survive that experience and not remember a moment like that? And I'll just share one story from my contemporary memories, or two. One was going to Panera. He was like in his 90s, and he was driving me to Panera, which was terrifying in 92, 93. But we go in, and, he had not been going to Panera for like a year, maybe 2. We walk in. Mr. Edelman! They're all waiting behind the counter. Would you like your regular, sir? The manager comes back. Mr. Edelman, sit down. Don't worry. I'll bring it to you. And I've been to Panera 1,000 times before and since. No one greets you by name. They do not bring anything to your table. But like everywhere he goes, same experience at the bank. Everywhere you go, that was, people fell in love with him because of his goodness. And then the one more personal story I'll share is in my graduate college, moved back to Cleveland, and I was at work when I get a phone call from my college girl, from my first love, Lindsay, and she's like, "I'm breaking up with you." So, my blood pressure goes up. I can't see clearly. I have to basically flee the office, drive home, trying to crash my car. I'm just like a total mess. Go up. I'm lying in my bed, miserable, depressed. I don't want to see a soul. I don't want to do anything. I am just besides myself with a crushed puppy love. And so my mom comes up, knocks on the door, and says, "Good news, family's coming over for dinner." I'm like, "Great." So there's 10. They have Laura, I'm sure, is there. And the whole everyone was there. And I come downstairs. I hold myself together. And I see Grandpa there, so I go talk to him. He's like, "No, that's a safe spot to be." He just looks at me immediately and says, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Lindsay broke up with me." And he looked at me in the eye and he said, put his arm around me and he said, "Sometimes I think about it. I think about everything I went through, all that I lost, all that I suffered." And he's like, "And if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't change a single thing, because then I wouldn't be standing here holding you." And something broke at me in that moment, and I started to heal, and I instantly felt better, because he just had this way of holding you. And so I love Grandpa. I'll miss him, and I hope that we can all take that love that he shared and spread it around in our lives. Thank you.
I now invite Clifford Goodman.
Please consider the 10-decade arc of Alan's astonishing life. He entered a world recovering from a great war and a great pandemic, living in a country that was sometimes unwelcoming and even worse for his community. Still, a boy, a lumberyard, and a river. Then, a depression, a brutal totalitarian force from the east, disappearance of his beloved father, banishment to the Siberian Gulag, a brutal fascist force from the west intent on exterminating his remaining family and their community, cold, starvation, isolation. Then, somehow, survival. Yes, a tractor, an appendectomy with no anesthesia except for a hand held by a young girl. Then, liberation, a refugee, border crossings, immigration, a new life. Alan was so often tossed into the stormiest of seas. He would go under, but then he would bob up and reemerge. But not alone, always bringing up others with him. A brother, a family, and more family. A synagogue, a community, dear employees, and more. For Alan, this was the best country, and he loved democracy, and we know why. This was the best location in the nation. Yes, every day was the best day, every meal was the best meal, and every grandchild, every great-grandchild is the most beautiful, the smartest, and the most talented. And he sang those sweet lullabies to them all. I think you've heard them. Even just days ago, just a few days ago, Alan retained a spark of recognition, warmth, and a kiss to you. The arc of Alan's life took him through to some concerning, turbulent times today. But just knowing how Alan survived and thrived with joy, we can seek to follow his beautiful example. And just as Alan comforted his grandchildren and great-grandchildren with an ancient Slavic lullaby, we sing to dear Alan, Bayou, Bayou, Bayou.
Now I invite Sheldon Edelman.
You okay? You need me to read it.
Rabbi. Hope. Doesn't have to be long. You know the essence of my dad. You've heard. There were some bad years, but with my father, they were always good years. And when the commissar rode up, said the war is over, you can leave. And that was it. You heard he came to America. Somebody asked me, well, how did he get there? Well, the trains ran, and it was free. You could get on a train anywhere in Europe. And somehow, I don't know how news traveled, but if you could get to Germany, you could get to America. And he said his sister, Anya, had a wedding in their home in Baleka. 3 days, 300 people. I don't think there were 300. I don't think the house was that big. But in 1934, they went to New York. So Dad and his family, Grandma, I met Grandma, and Uncle Nat had some place to go. And so December 25th, 1947, Christmas Day, they arrived in New York. Dad got a job in the garment industry. Told me he was making $60 a week, but he was soon promoted to a management job, and they paid him $80 a week. And with that money, he was able to save money, and him and his brother, it was always him and his brother. Every story was him and his brother. They were inseparable, throughout their childhood and coming to America. And Dad met my mother. Was on vacation in the Catskills, and we have somebody here who was at that wedding. Sorry, girl. And so mother dragged Dad back to Cleveland. He met his father-in-law, and Julius was from the School of Hard Knocks too. And the love was there. They got married quickly. I think Dad got married quickly all the time. The dating ended pretty quick. He kind of was a very decisive guy when it came to the marriage business. And so the first thing is new father-in-law sits them down, and they had this discussion. What are you gonna do? You gotta work. And Dad didn't know what he was gonna do. So his father-in-law says, Grandpa Julius, he says, Alan, I think he called him son, he called me son, he called everybody was son. He said he was a plumber by trade. He said, you don't want to be a plumber. The work's too hard, digging ditches, carrying cast iron tubs on your back to third floors. He says, no, that's not for you. And then he thought about it a little, and he said, Grandpa owned a hardware store, West 73rd in Lorraine. He said, you don't want to be in the hardware business. You're going to work nights, and you're going to work weekends. He said, you're going to be in the plumbing supply business. Bingo. And so that was the seed, and that's how it started. Grandpa knew everybody that owned a hardware store. First customers right here. And he outfitted a step van, And in the step van, there were boxes lined on both sides. And in the boxes were all the parts. Dad's English wasn't very good. I can tell you more stories about Dad's English. It got a little better over time. But not a leaf is moving. That's what Dad would say. Not a leaf is moving. And so my mother made him a book, and in the book there was a page, there was a number, and next to the number was a picture, and next to the picture was a price. And with that book, he'd go into a store, and the guy would say, give me 5 number 7s, give me a few number 3s, and a little this, and he'd run out to the step van, and, you know, he put the whole order together, made an invoice, went back in, collected the money. Within a few years from the step van, there was a basement warehouse, small, and the first employee was hired, and the garage had the pipe racks in it. I drove by that house a couple months ago. Still there, just the way we left it. And that was the beginnings of the company. It's been 70 years. I could talk about everything that happened after that. It would go on for, we don't have all day, all night, next week to boot, the rest of the week, but Dad was meticulous about a lot of things. And you heard the story about the customer with the horse-drawn carts, and Dad makes that bill of sale. That same accuracy translated to Edelman Plumbing Supply. He was a stickler. I don't know how many times he walked in my office. He stood at the door and he says, do you know? And I said, what? He says, we're missing 5, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, after we had a computer, I could go see where he made the adjustment 3 months ago. We were missing 5, we added 5, and I remember on the west side, you know, I'll tell you a funny story. Dad had a good friend, David Goldfinger, and his best friend's right here, Max. I think Max was Dad's best friend. You're lucky. And I was sitting in my office at that point. We had expanded enough that I had my own office. Dad's in the next office, and I hear him say, Fook. Every time I drive down Shaker Road past Fook's Matsuri, I'll never forget. Every time I drive by there, I'm going to think of Dad, because he was in that office. He said, Fook's. Dad never had a swear word in his life. Mr. Goldfinger, I hear him. He thought Dad was funny. He said, Fook's, what's Fook's? Dad says, you know, Fook's. That was the closest Dad ever came to a swear word. He never swore. He never drank, except one Long Island iced tea. And Laura and I remember talking yesterday, said, Dad, you know, Dad only drank 1 drink, but that's not true. When he had the appendicitis and his appendix taken out in Siberia, vodka. So he drank twice. Maybe that's why he never drank. And but he was quiet at work. He was nice to everybody. He treated everybody like family. The customers loved him. His staff loved him. And he didn't want an empire. He just wanted to go to work. He just wanted to make a living. He just wanted to make a reasonable competitor called me up. He says to me, oh my God, this is a long time ago. He says to me, he says, we just started selling gas piping, and there was a little stab fitting that went at an insert. It was an insert. It cost 75 cents. My dad was selling it. We sold it for $1. The guy calls me up. He says, Shelley, can't you use any other multiplier but 1.33? Everything you sell is 1.33. It It was a very simple system. I said, okay, fine, we'll sell it for $1.25. So we had, we had a lot of, it's hard to believe those years just went by. And, Dad was driving to work until he was 90. And then after that, I started driving him to work, but he had to go to work later, 8:30, because I don't like getting up early in the morning. And at 2 o'clock, he'd say, okay, I'm ready to go. Jackie would pack him a lunch every day, sat there and had his lunch at his desk. And you know what? He was really, really happy. That was his retirement, that and some other things, his plants. Dad had a good life. Dad had a real good life. And, they say quit while you're ahead. He had love for 3 wives, 3 families. There are a lot of grandchildren. Walked Laura down the aisle, he walked Cindy down the aisle, he walked Marcy down the aisle. And he was stability, He held everything together when things were tough. But his legacy to the Edelman family and everybody that knew him is that with all the things that happened in his life, and there were some horrible things, he never forgot the past. Dad always lived for the future. His cup was always half full.
Laura Leventhal.
Those before me have done a beautiful job of capturing the essence of my dad. I am a very blessed daughter. Dad, I respect you. I love you. I appreciate you. And I am very, very proud to be your daughter. 4 very simple sentences, very simple thoughts, and a lifetime in the making. The more I see the relationships that some of my peers have with their parents, the more I realize just how lucky I was to have you as a father. Sheldon and I came to expect that whenever your name was mentioned in public, someone who heard the name would invariably comment, "What a nice guy." In the business world, as those before me have said, your word was as good as any legal contract. And on the home front, you always were supportive of my decisions. And I know that was sometimes challenging. My dad is testimony that a person with a solid work ethic can achieve stability without higher education. You're proof that you can garner respect from your peers and your competitors alike without an advanced degree, without any degree. It's been a blessing and an inspiration to grow up with someone who has faced adversity of unimaginable scope, yet maintained a positive outlook. You've shown me by action, not just words, that being kind to others, whether they be friends, whether they be subordinates, is the only way to lead my life. You displayed the confidence and the self-awareness to be decisive when appropriate. And you've always given your love, unconditionally. I hope I've made you proud, Dad. I hope my name for you was a blessing, just as yours was and always will be for me. I hope I took enough time to let you know just how much I appreciated having you as my dad, not just on Father's Day or Hanukkah. And I'm ever so grateful that your grandchildren, as adults, had the time to really and truly get to know you. I love you, Dad. Your time with us has ended, but that love never will.
Thank you for all of the beautiful words shared with us. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Alan, but I feel from our time the other day in my office to today and hearing his stories, I feel like I know him quite well. My friend and colleague, Rabbi Danker, couldn't be here today, and I asked him if he'd like to share some words, and so here's some of his thoughts that he wanted me to share with the family. One of the first times I met Alan and Jackie in their home, he gave me a tour of the pictures of his family, those lost in the Holocaust, as well as their wonderful family and life that he built in Cleveland, which of course included Edelman Plumbing Supply. The company literally started out of the trunk of his car. He had nothing. Starting on the west side of Cleveland and expanding to the east side, Alan built a company now in the hands of the next generation that is a Cleveland institution. Alan always amazed me. He was one of those people who did not deny the horror that he experienced, nor the loss to our people. But to my experience, he remained cheerful, optimistic, and caring. He was smart in every possible way. He told me to note the dedication to TE's boardroom. I'm new to Temple. He didn't write that, I just said that. Where so much of TE's leaders, students, and staff gather so often, the dedication is by intent inscribed as the family spelled their name in Europe, another indication of how Alan remained connected to the past while being dedicated in a most positive way to the future. Rabbi Danker shared this story. The plumbing contractor, a gentleman now in his 60s, who is working on our house, is from the west side. Edelman's came up as we were sourcing for the project. The plumber related how as a young man just starting out, no plumbing supplier would give him a line of credit except for Alan Edelman. He remembered how Alan said, "I can see that you are a worker. Take whatever you need. I know I'll get paid." To this day, the plumber credits Alan Edelman with having given him the opportunity to succeed. We'll never know how many people are out there who were blessed by Alan Edelman. I'd like to invite us to close our eyes and to reflect on the memories and blessings Alan was to each and every one of us, the stories that we heard today, perhaps some that we knew, perhaps some that we didn't, his gentle ways, his loving ways, his ways of kindness, celebration of every single day, every meal, every salad dressing, every person with whom he came into contact. I invite us to reflect on those, to cherish those memories. So long as we hold them in our hearts, he will never truly be gone. We will just carry him a little differently from now on. I invite the family to rise for El Malerachamim. El Malerachamim shochein bamromim, hamatzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashechina, im kedoshim utehorim, kizohar harakia, mazhirim, et nishmat Aharon ben Yishayahu v'nechama, shehalach le'olamo, bal harachamim, harachamim, yastirehu b'seter kenafav le'olamim, Vitzror bitzrachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen. Fully compassionate God on high, to our loved one, Alan Edelman, who has entered eternity, grant him clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold him in the embrace of your wings. Secure his soul in eternity. Adonai, he is yours. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. We may be seated. The dust returns to the earth as it was. The Spirit returns to God who gave it. In only the house of the Spirit which we now lay within the earth, the Spirit itself cannot die. O God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which loss inflicts is the measure of a love stronger than death. Though we cry in the anguish of our hearts, may we be like children who know that their parent is near and who cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In this spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us to your keeping.
No, you can leave it there.
It is now our sacred obligation to fulfill the highest form of a mitzvah, to tuck our loved one in one more time. I'll invite us to join to place earth on top of the casket as much as it's possibly permissible at this point. After we have placed the earth on the casket, I will invite us to quietly find our places back where we are so that we can recite Mourner's Kaddish. After that, the cement vault cover will be placed on, and if we'd like to stay and place the rest of the earth on top of the casket, we may do so. So at this time, I invite the family first to come up and to place the earth on top of the casket, tucking him in one more time.